for coming to class. I have some 8 a.m.s myself, so I know sometimes it's a challenge, but I'm glad you guys all made it out today. So I'm going to talk about using business as a force for good, and my name is Chad Howell, and my business is called Forever Great. And I'm a student at Grand Valley right now. I live up in Grand Rapids, and I was actually at Western last time, was my senior year of high school, and I came here for a campus tour, and I thought the campus was cool. Obviously, I didn't end up coming here, but I enjoyed the campus, enjoyed Western, and my dad actually went to Western too, and he really enjoyed his time here. When he was a freshman, the drinking age was actually 18, so he really enjoyed his time here. But besides that, my roommate right now in Grand Rapids also goes to Western, so he commutes down here a couple days a week. So I'm kind of surrounded by Western stuff, and I've always had a spot for Western in my heart. So although I did go to Grand Valley, I'm happy to be here today. So about a year ago, a buddy of mine and I were hiking in Rosie Mound Park in Grand Haven. It was a warm fall day, oddly warm for November, and we decided to take a trip out to the lake, hiked through some trails, the forest, and then out to the beach. And when we got out to the beach, it was ridden with litter, ridden with trash. And it wasn't big plastic bottles, it wasn't cans, it wasn't bags. They were small pieces of plastic. So I could tell they must have been broken down, washed ashore, or somehow ended up here. And that was the first time I kind of stopped to think about it. Now, I've lived in Michigan my whole life, and I'm an avid hiker, camper, traveler, so I love all things outdoors. So I've seen my fair share of trashed trails, trashed beaches. But something about that day just stuck out to me and forced me to kind of think a little bit more. So my friend and I talked about it while we were there, and we were like, you know, why don't we hear much about this? Why don't we hear much about what's going on in the Great Lakes? We hear a lot about large-scale global climate change concerns, whether it be oceans and pollution in the oceans or forest fires or just crazy global concerns. But we don't hear much about what's going on in our own backyard. And so I went home and started doing more research that day. And to kind of sum up some of the research that I came across, I'm going to play a video for you guys. Dr. Palmer actually sent me this video, and it does a really good job summing up kind of some of the concerns and plastic pollution issues that we're facing in the Great Lakes. Oh, there we go.
I've lived in Holland my whole life, and it's pretty sad to come out here and see cigar butts, cigarettes, different garbage just littered throughout. You don't really notice it until you start looking down and trying to actually see the plastic that's buried in the sand, and once you do, you realize that it's just about everywhere.
This section of river, you know, once you get through downtown, this is every other log jam, it's the same story. Just look at this one little spot right here. How many plastic bottles and garbage bags right here? It all flushes out in Lake Michigan. It's a huge issue.
Today we're in South Haven. This is North Beach. Very popular beach, draws lots of people weekdays and weekends. It's a beautiful spot, but unfortunately, if you look closely at the sand, you're going to find a lot of small plastic pieces just sort of buried in the beach. Most people just walk over it, don't even notice. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend 10 minutes, we're going to sift through the sand in this area behind me, and we're going to see how much plastic we can come up with.
So after 10 minutes, we found a pretty good collection of plastic fragments and bits and pieces of stuff here on the beach. We've got bottle caps and cigar tips. We got a bunch of nurdles, or these plastic pre-manufactured pellets, things that are melted. They come from the water and presumably are spilled somewhere in the manufacturing supply chain.
Those nurdles are the very beginning of the harm that's caused, right? So the nurdles themselves find their ways outside of the factories, whether it's on the transit, and go through rivers and streams and end up in Lake Michigan. We find them when we do cleanups. In fact, there was a great study by some colleagues in Ontario that more than 65% of the beaches they looked at across the Great Lakes, they found pre-production pellets. And what's interesting about them is that they're not just like the disintegrated water bottles. They actually are coated with chemicals that are especially toxic. So we want to make sure that they don't find their ways into our waterways. And this waterway is our drinking water.
For as long as we've had plastic as a widespread and sort of common feature of our lives, as long as we've been using it and having its benefits, we've also experienced the pitfalls, which have to do with what happens when it gets into the environment. So the study of plastic litter is kind of receiving a lot of attention lately. But in fact, the phenomenon of plastic litter occurring has been with us since plastic has been with us. You know, the first observations about plastic litter that got a lot of attention were in the ocean. There was something called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. I think that was one of the first kind of really widespread kind of communication. I think it was easy for us to separate, you know, our environment and our activities from what's going on, you know, on an uninhabited island in the Pacific Ocean. There was a kind of a geographic and a conceptual disconnect there. But studies that go on in rivers in our backyard or in the Great Lakes kind of remove that illusion that we're separate from that problem. In fact, it's the same problem. Our trash in the Great Lakes, the plastic litter and other materials, is really literally ours. We can't blame it on some other country in the world. It's from us. It's our municipalities, it's our neighbors, it's ourselves. You know, this is the trash that we generate, and it's in our backyard, literally. So that is a key distinction. It narrows down, you know, the scope of responsible parties to communities in the U.S. and Canada, and I think it can offer some hope too, because it means that if the sources are from us, then we have the solutions potentially at hand as well. When we're doing this work, we kind of conclude that there's a lot of sources of plastic and microplastic to the environment, and that can be distressing. That's one conclusion to draw, but I think another way to take that bit of information is to say, well, then there are just as many potential solutions. So there isn't really a single way of eliminating this problem, but there's a whole host of different potential activities to engage in.
Break Free from Plastics is a wonderful big piece of legislation in Congress right now that we strongly support. It really gets at the prevention side as opposed to the cleanup side. We want to stop the pollution before it starts. That is cost effective and it's smart, right? It's a lot harder to find those pellets, as you just described, in the waterways after they're there than to prevent them from getting there from the start. That's holding producers responsible for the things that they make, and that's what we want to do. We want to go upstream. And we really think that that's the most efficient way to do it. We just saw a recent study that was saying that doing that, moving towards reuse to things like this and away from single use, saves around $5 billion for cities and towns around the country and produces 200,000 jobs. So that savings of $5 billion and the earning of nearly 200,000 jobs, we also think that's a good math and the smart way to move forward.
All right. Big thing that sticks out to me from that, which is something I kept coming across over and over again when I first started researching these issues, is the 22 million pounds. And that number is only increasing and only set to increase. And the fact that half of that 22 million, 11 million, is in Lake Michigan alone. That's kind of the most frightening thing to me, at least. I know that's the lake I go to and swim, the beach I go to. I'm sure a lot of you guys go to Lake Michigan as well in the summertime. So, although it might look nice and clean and pretty from the average or infrequent beachgoer, there are a lot of rooms for concern. And like the video mentions, there's a lot of sources, problems, different approaches that can be taken for this plastic, but at the end of the day, it's there. And what happens when it gets there is it breaks down smaller and smaller into pieces called microplastics. And these microplastics get so small that they end up working their way through the water supply. And they work their way past the water filtration system, and we end up consuming them. We also end up consuming them through our food chain. But the drinking water, there's over 50 million people that rely on the Great Lakes for drinking water, and we're all drinking a little bit of microplastic. And there's even been studies done that show traces of microplastics in beer. So there was a study done by the WWF International that says we all consume up to a credit card worth of plastic every week, and we don't even realize it. And a lot of that comes through our drinking water. And this is what 1 year of plastic, or 1 year of our lives look like. We consume this much plastic in 1 year. So this would be kind of like replacing your Thanksgiving dinner this year with plastic. I don't think anyone would want to do that, but the one time a year you eat turkey and stuffing, switch it out with plastic. That's what we consume on a yearly basis. Now, I started to dive in a little more and wondered, well, where does this plastic come from? Where are all these microplastics coming from? What's happening here? And I realized something that I didn't think I would come across. And the largest source of microplastic pollution in fresh water is actually the clothing industry, and it comes from the clothing industry waste. And at 35%, it's the largest source in fresh water. And that kind of had me geared towards, well, what's going on in the clothing industry? Why is this happening? What's going on here? How can maybe some different approaches be taken in that industry? So on and so forth. And I was slightly familiar with pollution in the clothing industry. Actually, a semester before, I had just done a group project, and our project was literally on pollution in the clothing industry. Unfortunately, I was that one person in the group that was the slacker, so I wasn't really an expert on the topic, but I had a little bit of familiarity. So I knew I needed to research a little more and kind of find out what's going on. And out of all the textiles created in the world, 85% will go to the dump. So out of everything created and produced in the clothing industry, 85% of it just goes straight to the dump. It doesn't hit the shelves, doesn't hit your closet, doesn't hit any of those steps. And there's actually a great Netflix piece. You can also find it on YouTube. There's a show called The Patriot Act with Hassan Minhaj. Some of you might be familiar with that. He does a really nice episode on fast fashion where he talks a lot about numbers like these and what's happening in the clothing industry and how we're all kind of contributing to that. But that 85% number just really sticks out to me. And this is a global issue, so it's not something that's just Americans, it's a global issue. But of course, the lovely consumption habits of Americans are contributing to this problem. The average American throws away 82 pounds of clothing every single year. And not only that, but we're only keeping each garment for half as long as we did 20 years ago. So we're doing this buying, and replacing our closet, throwing it away, and buying, only keeping it for half as long, throwing it away, same cycle, over and over and over again. And in total, the clothing industry actually creates more emissions than international flights and marine shipping combined. So just think about all the flights happening right now, all the shipments going across the oceans right now. The clothing industry creates more pollution than that, which is pretty concerning. Now, after learning all this, I knew I wanted to pursue sustainability in the clothing industry and look at alternative ways to create clothing while minimizing the environmental impact. I knew there had to be a way to use recycled fabrics, recycled materials, something like that. And I found myself really itching to do something. I wasn't really sure what, but I wanted to combine my love for the Great Lakes and my new knowledge through research on Great Lakes pollution, as well as microplastics and the connection to the clothing industry, and the overall general lack of awareness I noted as I was going through this process regarding the Great Lakes environmental issues. And I kind of sat at the intersection of all these topics, and I found myself constantly surrounded by inspiration, whether it be beautiful sunsets at the lake, the crumbling shoreline, or even messages just hidden in plain sight at the beach. I knew I wanted to do something, but I still wasn't sure what, but I knew if I just started, it would come to me. So that's what I did. And what my work eventually cultivated into is called Forever Great, and it's a business I launched back in April this year, and it's a recycled clothing brand aimed at raising awareness for pollution in the Great Lakes, creating solutions within the clothing industry, and building communities for change. Now, what does that look like? We sell clothing made from 100% recycled plastics. We work with a manufacturer that takes plastic bottles, shreds them up, takes those flakes, melts them down into pellets, and those pellets get strung out into a yarn and woven together into a fabric. And we've also hosted beach cleanups this past summer to kind of take our mission and put it into action. We have plans to do bigger and better, larger cleanups next summer, so we're really excited about that next spring and summer. We also operate under our Give Great initiative, in which we give 8% of all of our profits to a nonprofit called Alliance for Great Lakes. And they're based out of Chicago, and they're doing a lot of great large-scale work across the whole Great Lakes region with preservation and prevention for the Great Lakes. We have a website that we operate everything on, an Instagram page as well that we operate on, and it's been a very organic process for Forever Great so far for myself and for the business. There's a lot of things that are in the works, as well as goals we have and things we're planning to do moving forward to achieve our mission and push our mission even further. So I've told you a little bit about the Great Lakes, a little bit about the clothing industry, Forever Great, but you're still probably wondering, who is this kid that's talking to the class right now? You might be thinking, Dr. Tim, really, who is this guy? He looks like someone I could have seen at the bar last night. But nonetheless, I wasn't at a bar last night. I am a senior at Grand Valley, studying marketing and finance, and I was born and raised on the east side of the state in Novi, Michigan, Detroit suburb. After high school, my family moved out to Muskegon, Muskegon's right on Lake Michigan, beautiful city, beautiful nature up there, and that's really where I fell back in love with the Great Lakes. So I've seen a little bit of the east side, a little bit of the west side of the state. Pros and cons to both, but either way, like I mentioned, I really fell back in love with the Great Lakes during my time in Muskegon, and that's important to my story, because without that time period, I probably never would have stumbled into Forever Great. So I'm also the youngest of 4 siblings. Do we have any youngest siblings in the room? Okay, nice. If you're an oldest, you probably don't like me, but anyways, I mention this because it's important to my entrepreneur story, and it's important because as a youngest sibling, and it's different for everybody, but at least in my situation, having older siblings, I kind of felt a little trapped. I felt like I had to live up to my older siblings, and like I said, every family has different dynamics, and it's not true for everybody. But I've always been outgoing and creative, but sometimes felt trapped by my older siblings unintentionally. It was unintended and unspoken pressure to kind of follow in line and live up to the hype of my older siblings. And it's not a bad thing. My older siblings are great people. If I was like them, I wouldn't complain. But we're different. None of them are entrepreneurs. I often felt my creativity get boxed up because I felt like I needed to act a certain way or be a certain person. This might be relatable to some of you, various different parts or reasons of that, whether it's your family or society norms that sometimes you feel are pushed on you, or various different things like that. But what it did for me is it only resulted in me delaying, recognizing and pursuing my creative and entrepreneurial passions. Once I learned to be myself and really fully appreciate who I am and understand that, my eyes began to open. And a lot of that coincided with the timeline of Forever Great. And now that you understand a little bit more about my context and what I bring to creating this business, I'm going to kind of get into the startup process now. We might have some future business owners in the room, or maybe even current business owners, but do we have any Shark Tank fans in the room? Okay, Shark Tank's one of my favorite shows. I've been watching it ever since I was a kid. Love Shark Tank. I've been watching this show for so long, and I always have and always probably will, and it's always inspired me to kind of want to start a business. And I would often find myself watching the show thinking, I could have came up with that. I know we've all thought that, thinking I could be on that show. That doesn't look that hard. Oh, that's a silly idea. And it was that kind of process for me, throwing around business ideas with friends. Everyone has that next great big idea that you're always tossing around. And it was years and years of that for me. It was years and years of that until, like I mentioned earlier, that hike that day on the beach where inspiration struck. And I decided to actually take the next step and do something. Now, when it came to actually starting the business, though, I didn't really know what to do. I was determined, but I was a bit lost. I had never started a business before. I'm barely getting by in school. How do I do this? And luckily, I found a program called the 77 Idea Lab, which is at Grand Valley. It's a business accelerator program for students. And I actually found out about it because it was at the bottom of a school newsletter email. So one of those emails that every student gets that no one really looks at. I happened to look at it for once and scrolled all the way through and saw it at the bottom. And basically, it's an accelerator program, so we had to submit a business idea, and they basically picked six or seven businesses that they thought were good ideas, and we each got $1,000 at the start, and we had a semester-long program where they helped us kind of understand the ins and outs of starting a business. And not only that, but they connected us with mentors and people in the community that were willing to help, and met some great people and learned a lot. And without that, I wouldn't have ever actually probably started a business. And along with that, they also gave us some funding through the form of grants, so different pitch competitions or things like that. And I mentioned that because, like Dr. Palmer mentioned, you guys have things like that here at Western. I'm not sure what they're called, but I know you can probably reach out to your entrepreneurship department, take a look at that. But every school has things like this, and there's resources out there that oftentimes are not utilized fully by students. I remember when I was going through the Idea Lab, I would tell my friends when they were asking what I was doing on a Thursday night when I would go meet, I would tell them, oh, I'm in the 77 Idea Lab, and explain it to them, and they had no idea what I was talking about. They're like, this is not a thing, I don't know what you're talking about. But there are these things that really want to help. They really want to help you out. And if you're interested in starting a business, that's, as a student, at least I would say that's the route to go. Along with that, I realized and was pushed into frequent collaboration with classmates of mine. I realized at the time, being a junior, that my friends and I, no matter the area of study, we had all kind of accumulated some knowledge at this point in our college careers. And at the same time, it was COVID, so not everyone had a job or an internship. But if they did, maybe they weren't really doing what they wanted to do in the job, weren't really using their talents to the full extent. So I took advantage of that and tapped into this and brought my friends in to help me out with the creation of Forever Great, to add their creative touch here and there. And a close friend of mine created the logo. She's a graphic design student. We had a lot of brainstorming sessions, and we created the logo together. A friend of mine also is really good at coding, so he helped me out building the website. And a friend of mine is also in advertising and PR, and so he helped me a lot in the early processes and in the startup phase of just kind of things I need to do to get the name of Forever Great out there. And he actually helped me out writing a press release that we were then able to use to send out to local publications in the area, because I knew I didn't really have a lot of money for marketing, didn't really have a lot of money starting out to really blast the name of Forever Great. So we had to get creative, and one of the ways we did that was through publicity. So my friends helped me out. We worked with the mayor of Grand Rapids, who was actually a professor of mine the semester before, so that was a great connection for us to utilize. And we were able to utilize all of her local media connections and kind of put all that together to try to publicize and do free marketing, essentially. Now, we launched in April, like I mentioned, and we launched on Earth Day. And we were able to get in the local news, and that eventually led and grew to the Grand Valley Magazine and the NPR radio feature that we discussed earlier. And all that kind of forced me into continuing to pursue the business. Now, the name was out there, our faces were out there, the website was out there, so I needed to, continue on and really double down on Forever Great and turn it into what I always wanted it to be. I also, throughout the launch and sustaining process, I was active in the community looking for ways to grow the business. Aside from just social media and word of mouth, we held a few pop-up shops and did some beach cleanups this summer just to kind of get outside for once. We were coming right off COVID. We just wanted to get outside, And we also participated in some business startup competitions, such as the one pictured here, the top left corner. That was a couple weeks ago in Grand Rapids, the Start Garden 100. And all these things just kind of helped Forever Great continue to move. And I learned a lot during this process of the launch phase and sustaining. And because it was one thing to start a business, but then I started it and I was like, well, what do I do now? I got to a point where I was like, how do I sustain this, keep growing it, and continue to push forward this mission? And so one of the biggest things I've aimed to do through all this is create a community for change, a community where people are encouraged to stay active and educated on the issue, contribute to solutions, contribute to cleanup efforts, and also rep the brand and know that their purchase and what they're wearing is going towards a good cause and it means something more, and it's also cleaning up the environment at the same time. So this is just some photos that we had customers send us, posted on social media and sent our way. Just some people wearing over the summer, wearing some Forever Great clothes in different areas. And the other side of this impact, or the other side of impact, is a little more tangible, a little more physical. The whole community side is kind of hard to track, but that's important. That's why Forever Great was started, to bring people together to have the dialogue surrounding the Great Lakes and surrounding the issues facing the Great Lakes. But on the other side of impact, through shirt sales, we've contributed to recycling over 2,000 water bottles so far. Each shirt is made from 8 plastic water bottles. And along with that, through our donation efforts, through our Give Great initiative, we're expecting to donate somewhere in this range by year's end. And those donations all go to Alliance for Great Lakes, like I mentioned before. And I kind of want to wrap up a little bit of this today with one of my favorite illustrations. It led to a lot of my inspiration and encouraged me to continue what I was doing. So it's doing nothing at all versus making small, consistent efforts. And it's a good old math problem. 1 to the 365th power is 1, but 1.01 to the 365th power is 37.7. And that's one of my favorites of all time. Whatever goals you have in life, whatever passions you feel, the best way to get there is by making small, incremental steps day in and day out. For me, that's building a business and trying to start a movement and trying to work towards change and a better future for the Great Lakes. And I know it doesn't happen if I don't do anything, but I also know it doesn't happen overnight. You can't rush or you can't cram last minute for your goals and dreams the same way we often do for exams. It's the slow, consistent steps that you take that will eventually build the stairs towards your goal. And for me, this is what it looked like. It was day in, day out. I knew there was stuff to do. I knew there were things I had to do to push forward this mission. But I knew I wouldn't wake up tomorrow and the Great Lakes would be clean. I knew that's not going to happen. I knew that day in and day out, it'd be the small incremental steps that would eventually work into what I was hoping to accomplish. And for you, it might not be starting a business. It could be writing a book. It could be painting. It could be starting a family in a few years. Whatever your goals and dreams are, you achieve them by putting in the daily, consistent efforts, the day in, day out things to get you where you want to be. And before you know it, you'll have your goals right there in the palm of your hand. And I want to fill you guys in on some next steps for Forever Great and some things that I've been working through and working on. Some of you, and also how some of you might be able to be a part of this. Building a business is a consistent work in progress, constant improvements and iterations and changes that are to be made and upgrades to be had. And these are some of them that I'm working on going forward. So one thing I'm really striving to do is incorporate strictly Great Lakes plastic into the clothing. So right now we use all U.S. plastic water bottles, and my next kind of step is to take plastic from the Great Lakes, whether it be scooped out of the Great Lakes or from the local recyclers around the area, and utilize that and turn that into clothing. Also, on the clothing note, we're looking to incorporate some recycled cotton, which is somewhat of a new fabric, but we're looking to incorporate that into the next line as well, and that will tie in real well with the slowing down of fast fashion and the things we're aiming to do to combat fast fashion and the pollution within the clothing industry. And we're also growing our team. So we're also growing our team. We're looking for help in marketing and sales area. We're looking for help in social media area. TikTok especially. If we got any TikTok stars in the room, talk to me after. But community efforts, we're looking for some people to help out with community efforts as well and more. So if anybody in this room is interested in being involved or simply learning more about Forever Great, you can reach out to me. You can come talk to me after. Or if anyone has any ideas, connections, things that you think would be useful to me, as students, we all like to utilize each other, whether it's for homework or whatever. But I like to utilize students the same way. So if anyone has any ideas, I'm all here for it. Also, I have some handouts and stuff after business cards if anyone wants to come by and talk to me after. And also, this is our Instagram page and our website. I know everybody in this room has an Instagram. So head over to your Instagram, pull it up, give it a follow, give it a shout, tell a friend to tell a friend. And also, for today, I want everyone to go check out the Instagram because today we're doing a giveaway for everybody that follows today. There's a lot of people in this room, so everyone that gives Forever Great a follow today, we're going to pick one lucky person and give away a free shirt to them. So if you want a chance at a free shirt, go ahead, check it out. But yeah, those are the main places, the website, Instagram, that we kind of interact and connect with you guys the most often. So check it out. And other than that, that's all I had for you guys today. So thank you.